Welcome to the world of rare disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I am a rare disease patient, a Rare New England board member, and your host for today's show. Today, our guest is Kevin Friart. Kevin is a seasoned drug developer whose professional career with Pfizer spanned 30 years. His varied roles gave him a broad and deep understanding of the drug discovery and development process. After retiring from Pfizer, Kevin started Salem Oaks. Salem Oaks helps organizations and disease foundations to develop educational tools and programs that they can offer to their communities. Today, we are going to discuss Kevin's personal and professional role, which led to his active part in the rare disease community. I am so thrilled to have you here today, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so happy to be here too. Glad to be a part of it.
Excellent. So let's start at the beginning. Can you narrow your 30-year career down to about a minute? I'm just kidding. I think let's get talking about your career in the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure. I'll give you the 90-second version.
Excellent.
So I started out in a biology lab studying pulmonary mechanics in guinea pigs. And that was a bench job. I was a technical associate, still hourly employee. And after about 3 years, I had gotten a couple of promotions, and it was the career ladder had ended for the technical staff. So I jumped over to regulatory affairs and became a medical writer because I was pretty good at writing up the reports and the science that I was looking at and doing. So as a medical writer, my job entailed taking information from all over the company and distilling it down into clinical study reports or sections of new drug applications, NDAs and INDs for the investigational new drug applications. And none of that information ever matched. It was always a little off. The numbers weren't quite the same. They rounded it differently. They said things differently. They came at different times. They came all over the place. So I really had to put together the puzzle of how does this whole thing work? At the same time, I was getting my MBA, and I got this opportunity to teach. Well, people noticed that I was putting this puzzle together, and I was starting to understand how the R&D division actually operated. And so I got the opportunity to teach our commercial divisions about that. And I built a simulation which squeezed 15 years of work into a one-day game, a competitive game. The marketing guys love competitive stuff. And so I had them competing against each other, trying to go from idea to getting a drug approved. To build that, I built a network with all the VPs of the R&D division. And I had to ask them, I've got 20 minutes to do what takes you 5 years. How would I do that? In learning that, one, I was able to simplify the whole picture while maintaining the realness of it. But two, I got to know these guys and they got to know me. And the opportunity came up for the chief of staff for the head of worldwide development. And when that opening came up, everybody just said, Kevin's your guy. You want Kevin. They didn't even really, ask too many people. There were a couple others who were in the list, but it was a job where they called me and said, hey, would you like to apply for this? Which was wonderful. And it was a job that took advantage of my MBA, took advantage of my network, took advantage of my people skills, but it wasn't using my whole brain. And so I went to my boss and said, what do I do? You're using about 30% of my capacity here. And he said, he was a Scottish guy. He goes, go add value, lad. And I was like, okay, MBA, go add value. What are we going to do? And a friend and I came together and started thinking through something called Pfizer Research University. The way PRU worked is that we took experts in a given subject or part of the business and turned them into teachers and gave them the tools they needed so that they could teach other people who could benefit from learning that. So everybody would know more of the whole, kind of like I had learned being a medical writer. And Pfizer Research University came together and was a great success. It ran for about 5 years before business conditions changed, and it was seen kind of as a luxury, and it was taken apart a little bit. And I ended up in human resources doing leadership development, change management, and team effectiveness. So I went from this running Pfizer Research University to a learning and organizational development role. From there, well, I did that for about 5 years, or not even 5 years, 3 years. And I just wasn't feeling like I was part of the business. It was kind of, oh yeah, I'm over in human resources doing something and the business is over there. So I needed to get back to the drugs. So I made the leap back into project management. And now I wasn't just teaching people about all this stuff I knew, they were holding me accountable for it. I was part of the leadership on these teams that were developing drugs. And I started in oncology, went to anti-infectives, did some vaccine work, did some work in inflammation and transplant. And then I ended up doing rare diseases in my last 3 projects or so. And even though I had all that long learning curve and knew all this stuff, when I got into rare diseases, one, it was really exciting. It was refreshing, and it challenged everything I thought I knew, because things in rare disease are pressurized because there's so few people. You get to know the people. You get to know the few experts, like a handful of experts in the world, and you really get close to the science of what's going on. And it's just a much more personal touch. And I personally believe that with rare disease is going to lead us into the era of gene therapy. That's where gene therapy has its most early potential. It's much less complicated in some of the rare diseases. And because they're rare, there's not a population concern here like you would have with something that everybody has.
Right. So yes, you have had a piece of many different roles over 30 years. So thank you for sharing that.
Just like I planned it back in college. I'm going to go
Sounds
ping,
like
ping,
it.
ping, 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 ping,
Absolutely.
ping, ping.
Well, it's great. And I think in the rare disease space, you have to have flexibility and the ability to turn on a dime. So it sounds like you're doing that already. Now I want to kind of turn it over to personal experience. And this, and we'll get here in a minute because it's all going to come together to where you are today. But I know you shared with me an experience with cancer, and I was hoping you could share that with our viewers because that gave you a perspective as being a patient. So I'd love for you to share that.
Sure. So at the same time that we were inventing Pfizer Research University, I noticed a lump on my thigh. It just looked like, like maybe I gained some weight. When I was running, I would get some sores there, and it was bothersome, but I wasn't too worried. So I went to my primary care doc, who I really didn't know that well. But I went to him, I said, yeah, I've got this lump on my leg. And he looked at it and he said, oh, that looks like a lipoma. You should go to a surgeon. And so I made the appointment with the surgeon. He took a look at it and he said, okay, we need to get an MRI done. And he said, but it looks like a lipoma. It seems to be, kind of loose in there, not adhering to anything. He said, it's good size, but, I think it's a lipoma. And let's shoot for, and I think it was like a week or two before Thanksgiving. We'll shoot for that Tuesday. That's the day that I do my surgeries. Well, time passed, I got the MRI done, didn't hear anything. Like the Monday before I was supposed to be going to surgery, I had not heard anything. So I called his office and said, I expected to get some pre-op calls and some instructions and things like that. He goes, oh, did my office call you? You need to make an appointment with an oncologist. And that was the first moment that I realized, okay, this is a little more serious than a fatty lump in your leg. This is something you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to learn what that means when you go to this oncologist. So made that appointment as quickly as I could. And it happened to be the day before Thanksgiving. And I went in and I saw her, and she looked at the MRI and she looked at my leg, and she said, well, it actually really does look like cancer. I can tell you it is cancerous. I don't know anything else about it. She said, I'm a hematologist. I deal with the blood. I don't usually do solid tumors. You need to find an expert, and particularly an expert that does things with solid tumors in the limbs. So I went home, My family's gathering for Thanksgiving. My folks had driven all the way across from Western New York, where the Buffalo Bills fans are just ecstatic these days. And they came in and they're like, "What's up?" And I said, "Well, I had this lump in my leg and I just went to an oncologist and they said it's cancer." And I said, "I got to call my boss," because he knew I was going to the appointment. And so I gave him a call and said, "Here's what's going on. The lump is a tumor, and I need to find a specialist in orthopedics. Someone who does solid tumors in the limbs." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that," and he hung up. Half an hour later, he called back and said, "On Tuesday morning, you have an appointment with the world's leading expert in liposarcoma, which is the kind of tumor that I had." And he said, "Just be there by 9:30 and he will take care of you." So I was like, great. So I get to come up to Mass General, up to Boston. Luckily living in Connecticut, I'm, close enough to either New York or Boston to tap into these kinds of resources. I got there. He took a look at it. He looked at my films. He did a needle biopsy and came back and he said, "Yeah, it definitely is cancer, but we need pathology to come back with a report." And he said, "So go home, wait for us to call. It'll be a week or so probably before we get a full report and have a plan for you." And that next week I was having a huge strategic meeting that I was running in my role as chief of staff. And I was at the meeting again up in Boston, and I got the phone call. And they said, "It looks like it's metastasized. It looks like it's stage 4. So you're going to go through a very aggressive chemotherapy and radiation regimen until it shrinks down, and then we'll go in and take it out. We don't want to just go in there right away." And I thought, okay. I called my wife and said, "Yeah, it's not good news. I'm on my way home. They basically kicked me out of the meeting and someone else took over." And I headed home, and we just kind of tried to start dealing with it. Okay, so we gonna have to have surgery, gonna have to do this chemo. What do we have to do about this? What can we learn? The internet wasn't anything back in 1998, so it wasn't nearly as useful as it would be today. And as we were waiting, our insurance company called. It said, "We noticed a bill coming from Boston, Massachusetts. That's out of network. You need to go to somewhere in Connecticut." So first I was just shocked, oh no, what's going on here? Secondly, I was like, okay, well, I got to find somebody in Connecticut. I'm going to call, Dr. Mencken back up at Mass General. And he's like, "Oh, it's just," he wasn't happy about it. And he said, "But I do have one of my students who works down at Yale, Gary Friedlander, and he's top-notch surgeon, and they've got a top-notch team down there." He said, "I would go right down there. I will set up, the appointment for you, the first appointment. We'll get you in there." And so it was a week or two later, past Christmas, I finally got down to Yale, and they started looking at it. And this is where my experience started to change. So now, okay, chemo, radiation, and surgery. Got that in your head. That meant I had an oncologist, a surgeon, a radiologist. I've got all these people who are doing all these scans on me. I had bone scans and heart, cardiograms, but also scans of my heart to check on my heart wall. And it was just very, disorienting, because I was just sitting in room to room to room, and I knew there was this team working on me, but I never saw them, and I never saw them talking to each other, and they never included me in the conversations. I would just wait for Dr. Friedlander to come in and kind of give me, the latest idea. And then one day he came in and he said, "We finally got the pathology report, the full report, and the tissues, and we're just not convinced that it's stage 4. And that was, a shock. Like, okay, so all of this work has been, done. What do we do? What's the plan now? He said, well, we need to do another biopsy. We can do another needle, and it could be just as inconclusive. We could go in and take a piece of it and do a more thorough biopsy. Or he said, we could just go in and take it out and look at it and see what it is. And for those of you who've had cancer, you're in a fighting mood. Yes, I'm a little impatient. Take it out right now. Can we do that immediately? And basically it was done immediately. So it was probably a few days later. They scheduled it, but pretty quick. And my time from when I found out that I had a lump until it was gone was from mid-November to January 28th of 1998. And I had a port in. I went back and got the port out, and the nurses were like, this is brand new. Did you ever use it? And I was like, no, I didn't. It's only been in there a week. The scar wasn't even a scar yet. It was just it had healed a bit. And so they were just amazed by that. And that was just, my real takeaway from it was, why don't I feel like I'm part of the team? I mean, my real takeaway is I've had 22 more years of life. So thank the Lord for that. And thank the Lord for changing whatever he did between Boston and New Haven, in answer to a lot of prayers for me, because the results just changed quickly. Right. But, I tucked that in the back of my head of, oh yeah, I got to figure out, how do we help patients be more involved? Or if I have to go through something like this again, how do I get more involved? I can add to this conversation.
Well, it's interesting because so many of the pieces of your story, not having the doctor network, having to wait, or having a connection that helps, that's always great, but not feeling like part of the team. Those are all pieces of the rare disease patient experience. So I think
exactly,
accidentally you had all that. So coupled with your professional experience, really, I can ask you this next question, but it makes sense that this led you to the rare disease community. But yeah, I guess I will ask the question anyway. How did this come together in your head to lead to where you are today, which is actually leading and finding an organization called Salem Oaks? I'd love for you to talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about my rare disease drug development experience and then just how different that was. And so it was something that seemed exciting to me. When I retired from Pfizer, just before I left, we had a big annual meeting of the project management group. So people coming from around the world. And we had a Parkinson's patient come and speak to us about clinical trials. And she told us about her disease, told us Parkinson's and how it manifests in people in general. But then she talked about what it was for her and in her life. And then she talked about what she had to do just to give the talk that day. And then she ripped into us about what we were doing wrong with our clinical trials and how we weren't understanding what was really important to patients and how much patients could help develop the drugs that we were working on. And it was just striking to me. I couldn't believe how she nailed it. She wasn't whining. She wasn't criticizing. She was truly critiquing us and giving us ideas for how to do it better. So I went and talked to her after and said, you were talking our language. You hit us right between the eyes with what we needed to hear, and we heard it. How did you do that? Most people don't understand the whole drug development process, what a clinical trial is, how to do that. She worked for a company that worked for pharmaceutical companies for clinical trials. So she was an insider. But she was there with someone from the Parkinson's Foundation. And I asked, do you train people to come do this? And she said, we have a program. It's called Patient Advocates in Research. And yeah, we train people. We talk to them about being advocates, how to speak their mind, how to tell their story. I said, well, do how do you educate them about the drug discovery and development process, like the whole R&D, not just a clinical trial? She goes, yeah, we got a little bit, a couple slides, but it doesn't go very deep. I said, well, would you like to go deep? You know, I that spent a lot of my career teaching people how to do this, and I would love to do that. And she said, yeah, that would be great. You know, when you retire in a few months, give me a call. Now, that's never panned out to good business for me yet, but it was a start, because at that moment I said, I'm going to start a company that does what PRU did for the outside and for
Excellent. And
patients
so,
and caregivers.
right. Sorry to interrupt. So that's what Salem Oaks is.
And that's what Salem Oaks is. So Salem Oaks was born in concept on that afternoon, listening to a Parkinson's patient. And I knew I was retiring. I had lots of plans. I was going to go into the ministry. That hasn't panned out, and this has kind of taken its place. It's become my ministry. It's also kind of where, you know, my ethos comes from. You know, so what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to serve people, and I'm trying to serve people that that are at a disadvantage. And so when Salem Oaks started, we didn't have a rare disease focus. We were just patient focused. And I started going to various conferences and getting involved in different discussion groups and starting to understand this idea of patient involvement, patient engagement, patient leadership, and trying to figure out, how do we get the patients onto the teams that are developing drugs? And so I wandered into that and started working on it, and then found myself drawn to the rare disease space again. And it's when you hit the community of people with rare disease, and you land in it, and you look around and you go, this is actually a wonderful place to be humanly. You know, it's wonderful people who are very motivated for their goals, really struggling with the enormity of the task that they're undertaking, and they want to be heard. And so over time, you know, I've narrowed the focus to rare disease. You know, that's who we serve. Other diseases are welcome to come and use our services, but we focus on rare disease and building those relationships and being part of that community.
Excellent. Can you tell me why you named it Salem Oaks? I thought this was very interesting.
So I live in Salem, Connecticut, and so that was kind of, oh, that's part of the name, right? And Salem means peace. So think of, in Hebrew, it's shalom, you know, and in Arabic, it's salam. In America, it's Salem. And so it means peace. I also have a tree that I can see right out my window here, a big old oak tree. It's about 600 years old. The arborist told us that this was the tree that was already big when, you know, the land was being settled, because they tore down all the other trees and left this one for the cows to get shade. So he figures it's about 600 years old. So I said, okay, Salem Oaks. It's a big, strong oak. I mean, it's huge, you know, 80 feet wide at the top. It's amazing. And it's resilient. It's gone through 600 years of hurricanes, blizzards, and whatever else New England weather can throw at them. So I thought, okay, so peace and strength, that's what we can give to patients. And that's why the name is called Salem Oaks.
Excellent. So can you tell me about the goals of the organization and what you bring to patient organizations and foundations?
Sure. So our vision is a healthcare ecosystem where everyone's collaborating with each other. So just like me sitting down there at Yale, not feeling part of the loop, we want everybody in the loop and contributing. And that requires helping people learn some new skills. We can't do that for every stakeholder in the healthcare system. It's me and my two daughters. And we're a tiny organization now. We will grow, but right now we're very small. And we can't do it for everybody, but we can do between the patient and the research world. we can step into that space and help those patients level the playing field, because they're walking into a space they didn't choose to. They found out that they have something or their child is diagnosed with something, and suddenly they're thrust into this position and they end up around a conference table with, 17 people who have MDs, PhDs, law degrees, that have been doing this for years. And there's no way for them to be truly influential. Sure, they can pull the heartstrings, and that's great. That's the motivation that patients would bring to us is great. There's so much more value to be had, though, if we could bring the patients up to speed so they understand what's going on here. What am I talking about? What decision am I influencing by what I say? Because now I can actually be targeted in what I do. And so what we do is we provide that education that builds knowledge, skills, and confidence to sit at that table.
Excellent. I think that's, as a patient, I think that's something everybody needs to learn. And I think you either are taught that or through experience. And so I think it sounds like you're doing both. You're teaching them and then helping them have that experience, which is great.
Well, and it's our way of doing our education. It's not formal education, but we use formal techniques, and it is experiential. Adults don't learn as much by reading things or just listening to things or even watching something like this as they do when they have to get in there and get their brains a little dirty and figure out how to solve a problem. That's when you learn. So that's the way we teach things. We put problems in front of people and let them wrestle with it and then guide them through, at the same time teaching them, here's what I'm doing to guide you through. Here's how I'm parsing the information. Here's how I'm framing the discussion, so that then when they do end up at that table, they're used to being there.
Right. So can you tell me, I know one of your clients is Friedrichs Ataxia patients and organization. So I think that is a good example of kind of how you've worked with them and, what it's brought to both the organization and to their organization.
Yeah. So Friedrichs Ataxia Research Alliance is one of the best patient foundations to work with. They've got their stuff together. They've been doing it since 1997, so they've had time to learn. They're also on the cusp of finding some treatments for debilitating and degenerative disease. And in their organization, they have these people that they call ambassadors. So they've got these ambassadors and they want to train them. When I was first starting the business, I had an idea for a type of course that would take people all the way through from idea to marketplace in about 8 weeks of a course, but I needed to pilot it to see if it would really work. So I approached the people at FARA, that's the Friedrichs Ataxia Research Alliance, and said, hey, could you guys find 6 or 7 people that we can just do the first 3 sessions? I just want to see if this is possible. The reason I picked them to talk to was, they had reached out to me. I had gotten to know some people, and I just was, I was enthused about what was going on there. And so we found 6 or 7 people that wanted to do this. One guy kind of took up the lead and really got people moving on it, got everybody signed up. We did the first 3 sessions, and I said, okay, so that's the pilot. We're done now. Well, what we were doing was a case study. And we had started with, what's Friedrichs Ataxia? Could you explain it to our board of directors, please? Okay, now how could we attack Friedrichs Ataxia? What are the mechanisms of biology around this that we could find targets? And then we got to the third one. It's like, okay, so which one are we going to pick? And then they were like, wait, we can't stop now. We need to finish this. And so we finished the 8-week course. Not too long later, I was talking to one of the staff members at FARA, and she said, the guys who took that course are impressing people. They're asking different questions. They're talking in a different language. They're much more effective and directed in what they're doing. I want more of that. So I'm going to find a way to do that. And she went out and got a grant, and we created a course which focused very much on reviewing clinical trial protocols, which is one of the tasks that their ambassadors are asked to do, that FARA is asked to do all the time. but their ambassadors, they would review them and they could give some input, but they weren't, they were kind of swimming in unknown waters. So we put a course together. They wanted to do a course on clinical trial protocol review. That's a task that FARA gets asked to do all the time, and their ambassadors could only superficially help them. And so we created a course that taught them the background of both the ethics and the review of protocols and what goes into that. And then it culminated with actually reviewing a protocol that's out there in clinicaltrials.gov for Friedrichs Ataxia and them critiquing it. And so we did that 4-week course. It worked wonderfully. We did that course 3 times with them. And they turned around and said, okay, we'd like another course. We've got a big training day coming up in October. We'd like to figure out how to do that. And we've just started working on a course about gene therapy ethics and the tough dilemmas that gene therapy poses, particularly for parents of young children who are most likely to be eligible for gene therapy and benefit by it. So yeah, our relationship with FARA has been wonderful. There's only 1,500 people in the country with FA, and I know somewhere between 70 and 80 of them by name and face. And,
right.
When we used to be able to hug and things like that,
Yes. The days before COVID and hopefully after COVID. So it sounds as though kind of your vision of what you wanted Salem Oaks to be is growing and is working with these patients, like, for example, with FARA. So I know you have free resources available. So I would love for you to kind of point us in the direction. Where can we find some of those free resources so, viewers can understand a little bit more about Salem Oaks?
So we got a number of things. One is our online courses. There are some that are out there for free. They're kind of short courses, 10, 15 minutes. And very topical. So there's one that's on the background of clinical trials. There's one that's on clinical trial design. There's another that's just kind of a broad overview very quickly of the whole process. So those are there, and they're at www.salemoaks.com/resources, or you can just look for resources on the page there. We also have some more extensive courses, which will take you an hour or 2 to do, that go deeper into those topics and tie them together and really focus on decision-making that takes place within the process and enlists the user, the participant in making those decisions. So they actually drive which direction the course goes in as they do it. Those aren't free. But those are the things that we offer to foundations and disease organizations to offer to their communities. So there's a retail price out there. But if those organizations contact us, what we will do is work with them to create a discounted price, a vastly discounted price, to go directly to their communities through their own websites, because we don't want to become the source for everybody. If someone's got a particular diagnosis, they should go to that foundation and build that relationship, and we'll work in the back office and give them what they need.
Excellent. And is there any final words you'd like to share with our viewers?
So I think it goes back to the value of patients and caregivers and people who are experiencing these disorders. They're experts. They live it all day long, every day, but we're not tapping into that expertise very well. We bring them in for a little while, a meeting or two. That's great. But as I said, they're in a world that they don't understand, and they never get the chance to learn the ropes, and they don't have the time given their disorder, especially if it's something that has a clock ticking on it. They don't have the time to learn what these people have learned throughout their careers and multiple degrees. So I think that we need to tap into each other's resources here. So I'm offering knowledge and experience doing this. Industry could step up and share their knowledge and share their resources to fund some of this. And I think the other thing is to give people who are invited into that situation, give them the opening and the opportunity to learn with you how to tell you everything that they should be telling you. It's too easy as an academic driven, industry to kind of like say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about too quickly because you haven't really listened. So that's my last word is industry should listen.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you. I mean, I love hearing about all your experiences, and I mean, I've met you a couple of years ago, and I'm constantly amazed at seeing what you're doing, and I'm very happy to be able to share that with our viewers. So thank you for being a guest on our show.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So part of our show includes the Rare New England in Motion segment. This show will be showcased live via Rare New England's Facebook Live page. Viewers can tune in live to see the show and talk with our guests and members of Rare New England staff to have an interactive discussion and answer any of your questions. This show, along with any of our shows, can also be found on the Rare New England YouTube page and social media accounts. Do you have a question for Kevin or for any of us? Please send us an email to info@rarenewengland.org, and we will be sure to include that in our show. Rare New England in Motion is the perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging with our community. From all of us at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching, and remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, then think zebras. Thank you.